Hello and welcome to Success is Never Accidental. I'm Lynn Payton and I'm passionate about helping individuals and organisations to get better outcomes and to feel more fulfilled. And it's my belief that strong leadership is key to success in any endeavour. So on this podcast, I get to interview some highly successful leaders across all sectors and internationally so that you can better understand their formula for success and start to identify some of the common factors. But nothing changes without action. So at the end of every podcast, there's a challenge for you, a challenge to reflect, to evaluate, to decide, and to act. In other words, to do something differently going forward. My guest today, Tanya Ward, is the Chief Executive of the Children's Rights Alliance in Ireland, a leading national organisation that unites over 160 members working to protect and promote the rights of children. A passionate advocate for social justice, Tanya has played a pivotal role in shaping child policy and law in Ireland. With a background in law and human rights, Tanya is widely respected for her ability to navigate complex policy landscapes while keeping children's voices and experiences at the centre. She's a regular media commentator and advisor to the Irish government. Under Tanya's leadership, the Children's Rights Alliance has spotlighted urgent challenges facing children in Ireland today. These include rising child poverty, record levels of homelessness, long waits for mental health services, and serious shortfalls in other sectors. Despite progress in areas like education and healthcare access, many children still face unsafe living conditions, educational inequality, and inadequate state interventions. And although we're talking primarily about Ireland, those factors are visible in many, many other countries. So in this episode of Success is Never Accidental, Tanya shares insights from her journey in advocacy and leadership, exploring what it's like to influence systems, build coalitions, and lead with purpose in the face of challenge. I'm delighted to welcome Tanya Ward. Good afternoon, Tanya, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Delighted to be taking part in the podcast.
Tanya, as I said in the introduction, you've just done amazing work over the past, 12 or 13 years since you've been CEO of the Children's Rights Alliance. But wind back a little bit. How did you get into this rights-based work in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I never really knew human rights existed, certainly not in primary or secondary school. And I think the first time I even saw the term human rights was there was a catalogue for courses and you could buy it in Eason's. And saw there was an LLM in human rights in Queen's University Belfast, Queen's College Belfast. And I remember thinking, I don't know what that is, but it sounds like something I'd be interested in. Because I suppose when I was younger, I was certainly interested in equality issues and certainly interested in the environment and ecology. So I think a big part of why I do what I do or what's behind me is really is linked to my family and how I grew up. And that really did shape me. So my mum was a lone parent and she had me when she was 20. So she's very young. And she had met my biological father when she was living in Germany, and he was a Lebanese refugee. And she, at the time, and she got pregnant outside marriage. Obviously, she wasn't entirely sure how it even happened, as was very common at that time. And I suppose he wanted to marry, and she just felt it wasn't going to work out. And my grandparents allowed her to return home after a bit of convincing, because, Ireland in the 70s, was still in that blight where women having children outside wedlock was a problem. And my grandparents, it's funny, they had a different attitude to it. They were both deaf themselves and from a very traditional conservative Catholic family. And my granddad, until I was born, was very much of the view my mum should give me up for adoption, whereas my grandmother was never of that view. She thought, no, well, let's have the baby. She loved babies and she thought this was a great thing. And then when I was born, my granddad said, no, let's keep her. And we lived with my mum, my grandparents, until I was 10. And my mum married my dad, Paddy. So he's my stepfather who ended up adopting me. And I suppose my mum's experience of being a lone parent, and understanding that my grandparents' experience of being deaf had a big effect on me, to be honest, because, I remember being a young child and not realizing they couldn't hear. I think I was 6 when I realized they couldn't hear. So I didn't realize, and I often reflect back at how did I not know they couldn't hear? Well, in our household, they weren't disabled. So when someone rang the doorbell, a light flashed on and off. We happened to sign to each other instead of speak to each other. My granddad looked at subtitles on the TV. My granddad went to work. He drove a car. He had a normal life. So I had no awareness really that they were deaf until I was around 6. And then, of course, when you do discover it, you nearly can't believe it. You're like, you can't actually hear me, so I can just scream and shout, and you test that out. I remember being that age, even testing my granddad's ears and writing it down and going, okay, so you definitely can't hear that, but can you hear this? Can you hear that? And so, it became a game a little bit. But one thing that was very apparent to me about their experience of the world was, my grandmother, for example, at some point she had a very negative experience with the local butcher. And, if you're deaf, people would often write a little note and say, I want, 3 chops and a piece of lamb. And she did it as she would do normally, but the guy thought she was begging and threw her out of the shop. And she'd never go to a shop again after that. So, those kind of things were, the injustice of it, roiled me, and then I think as I got older, I did think about my heritage, not in a real meaningful way, I'll be honest, because other people, I know it's a bigger part of them, and what their DNA says or their family connections. And it was I have to be honest, it was quite a shallow thing, meeting my biological father. Maybe I'll pick up pick up French, meet a few family members in Lebanon, that kind of thing. But certainly him being a refugee, my mum being very focused on European issues, all of that helped kind of shape my geographical imagination and my openness to issues. And so, but when I went to college, the focus was on the environment and on geography. And I was very affected by the news around the ozone layer and CO2 emissions. And I thought when I went to university, that was probably the direction of travel. But that changed when I got to college, because I realized not that I wasn't interested in those topics, but I was very interested in the social and political topics. And that kind of led me towards the human rights path.
Wow, you managed to tell your story and make it so human and fun, and all of those issues normalized everything, which is, I guess, really one of the things you try to do in work on a regular basis. But I'm laughing because my son just got married in Charlotte in North Carolina, and his wife's heritage is Lebanese, and we didn't have any Lebanese connections prior to that. And we grew up knowing basic sign language because the couple across the street were deaf and had no speech. And my daddy was the one that sort of did everything for them. So we all were taught how to communicate them with at a very, very basic level. So isn't it funny, just the things that you find that are connections? Yeah. So what happened next then?
Yeah, so I mean, I went to. I mean, I was very lucky, to be honest, because I kind of scraped into college. And I took up geography, and geography was always my favorite subject. And I decided to go to UCC, which is an unusual step because obviously I'm a Dub and I'm from Cabra. But the school I went to, there was many positives and many negatives, and I suppose one of the negatives was they used to keep the girls from Cabra and from certain parts of Blanchardstown together in particular classes, and the girls from Castleknock and Avon Road. I mean, I could tell you the line of where they'd be. The Castleknock girls would be at the top, the girls from Avon Road would be next, right? They'd go down like that. And it certainly made me feel that I wasn't going to fit into somewhere like UCD, even though the points were the same as UCC. So I had this strange idea. I go to Cork and I fit in, and I thought I'd move away from home. And But to be honest with you, the first year I just missed home the whole time. I was probably too young for college. I was only 17, turning 18. And my brothers and sisters were young. So I just missed everyone desperately. So I was home every weekend, costing a fortune on the train getting home, because I found it very challenging, to be honest, in first year of college. But I suppose in second year and towards third year is when things start to kind of really land. And I find it much easier to live independently of my family. But I was very attracted to the kind of subjects around equality and social justice, refugees. And I had I was very fortunate that Parish McHenry, who was the founder of the Irish Centre for Migration Studies, and was one of the thinkers in Ireland around migration and race equality. I got to work with him after I did my degree and my master's, and that was looking at the protection of people seeking protection in Ireland and Norway. And it was through that route and doing. I got to do an internship with the Refugee Council. There was a program, an intern. You could get a summer jobs program, and you got payment for it, and then I got a FOSS scheme. So I got to work in Refugee Council. I got £80 a week, which was when you've just come out of college, just you're delighted. You're delighted with that. But that meant I was able to do some policy work with them, and I realised through that work, actually, human rights, I was so attracted to it. I remember even reading the European Convention of Human Rights for the first time and just going, oh my God, this is great. Yeah, absolutely. I completely buy into these values, when I read it. And I suppose it's based on that then I remembered there was an LLM in human rights in Queen's, and I kind of knew I was going to go in that direction. And I think about, why did human rights sing to me in the way it did? Because the language is written to sing to you, right? It's written to motivate. It has motivate generations of marginalized and vulnerable people. But I came from a pretty traditional Catholic family, and with very strong values, and very Christian, really. Real social justice values. I had aunts that were nuns that came back from the missions in Africa and would tell me stories about development issues and inequality. And so all of that, of course, makes sense, because human rights, are reflective of Judeo-Christian values. So you can see why it would connect with me. And I am very conviction led, actually. That's kind of what motivates me, is the values and ideas and the outcomes. That's why I'd be very attracted to human rights. So after that, I was working with the City of Dublin VC on an education project on the rights of separated and unaccompanied refugee children and adult refugees. And I did a master's in international human rights law with Queen's. And then I got to work with the Irish Council for Civil Liberties. And I stayed there for 8 years and went in as a policy officer and left as deputy director. And when I was there, I got to work on, all kinds of human rights issues. It was a brilliant education and entryway into the human rights work. I remember my first submission was actually on a Bill of Rights for the island of Ireland, so, huge, big, forward-looking, thinking kind of events. And I did another report on judicial independence. Wrote other reports on Garda human rights issues, criminal justice, equality law, the campaign for marriage equality. So a lot of those big issues in Ireland, I got to work on it through the Irish Council for Civil Liberties. So I'm very fond of the ICCL, and it has a great tradition in Ireland. If you look at the people who have been involved in it throughout the years, Cad Erasmil, Mary Robinson, are some of the founders of the organisation. But throughout its history, it's had very important human rights and legal advocates involved with it, who've gone on to have a huge impact on the development of human rights on the island.
So fast forward to Children's Rights Alliance.
So I remember when the job came up, and the truth is there aren't a lot of opportunities in Ireland for leadership in human rights, to be honest. Right, very few. It's a small country. There's only 1 or 2 or 3 organisations where those opportunities came up. And I suppose what really attracted me to the job in Children's Rights Alliance was, it was just after the Ryan report, and there was this heightened sense of awareness in Ireland of the way children had been mistreated in the country. I think by that point there was 17 official reports documenting the failure to children. So it was something that, I was very personally disturbed by. And I remember when the Ryan report came out, it's so detailed, you could open up a chapter, on all the different schools. And one I opened up was St. Joseph's, where my grandfather went to school, and St. Mary's, where my grandmother went to school. And I mean, I was absolutely shocked to see the level of sexual abuse that was being carried out, and violence against children. And even up into the 90s in St. Joseph's, where my granddad went to school. So that really sat with me. And I knew by going into the Children's Rights Alliance job, I'd have an opportunity to have a big impact with it, and particularly, let's say, on an upcoming children's referendum that was planned. And in 2011, the government of the day, when Enda Kenda's government involved in the Labour Party, it actually was probably one of the best programmes for government we had on children's rights, on issues for young people in Ireland. Unfortunately, they had no money to do much, is the truth of it. But it was a very kind of exciting time, because there was the possibility of a new agency in Tusla, a referendum. There was going to be children first legislation on child protection. So all of that attracted me to the job in the Children's Rights Alliance.
And the Ryan report, of course, just, I think, stunned everybody. I think even though there'd been emerging reports over the years and we knew, but it was the enormity of and the scale of the abuse that was so shocking at that time. But what you were talking about, opportunities for leadership in this field. Leading an organisation like the Children's Rights Alliance, with so many diverse members, with so many different, if you like, core interests, how do you make it work? How do you make such a big network actually work, Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, it's the big challenge. It's on our risk register. And I think for any umbrella human rights organization, it's how you make that work. And I remember one day I presented the budget, the outcome for children of the budget to the board, and I showed where we had done work and the areas we hadn't done work. Because when you're trying to influence and advocate, generally you have to focus on asks. You can't give a shopping list. It doesn't get taken up. But if you go to them with one issue, you can demonstrate the evidence and the impact it's going to have and the change it'll have. You're more likely to get that over the line. And I showed the board, the outcomes, and they said, so where you did work, we got change, and where you didn't do work, we didn't get change. I said, yes. And they were like, oh my God, the responsibility. I said, I know, the responsibility on us, basically, because I can, even when we get impact, and we have had a lot of impact, you still can't feel, I failed this other group of children. That's part of the job, and it's part of, with the membership as well, you feel that you're failing one group of members over another from time to time. So I suppose one of the ways we try to try to identify issues to work on is we do a lot of consultation with members. So let's say moving into a strategic plan, we might do a survey and see what they want us to prioritize. And what they often will go for is poverty, and education will often come up. And then you'll see smaller numbers for other areas of work. And I suppose we also use insights from members. So members will contact me and tell me about problems that they're seeing. And then I'll go off and investigate it and see if I can triangulate and see if that is a real issue, and follow up on it. And other times we see reports like from HICWA, news reports, etc., that are telling us about a serious issue. And all of that will be part of the decision making about what we choose to focus on. But I mean, the other side of it is, it's even more challenging now than it was when I started. And here's the strange thing. The reason is there's so many more opportunities to affect change for children and young people. I can see in government, there's quite a shift really in how government departments interact with civil society. There's a real openness. There's a feeling of partnership. I mean, I often will go to meetings, let's say with officials in the Department of Children or with senior officials in Tusla. And I mean, it's pretty clear you have the same values, right? You want the same outcomes. You might disagree slightly about how you will get there. So, there's definitely a feeling of change kind of in the way the public service operates and is working on children and youth issues, and certainly even during COVID. I mean, I think for the public service, it's one of the high points of public service in Ireland. Like the interactions I mostly had with people in leadership positions and in government positions was, tell us what's happening, what can we do? There was this extraordinary openness and action, real fire in the belly to do something. So it's I suppose, in short, it's challenging. But one of the things we try to do is communicate to members that where we get change, it's because we've done 50, 60, 70 actions. And some of those might be, we had an online safety campaign and we were trying to get an individual complaints mechanism for children. So if you're a child, someone's bullying you online, there's content online and Facebook won't take it down. So this is one of the common ones, right? This is going on to this day. You'll be able to go to someone independent and complain to an online safety commissioner, and she'll be able to go and order the platform to take it down. So we were campaigning for that independent mechanism. It wasn't in the draft bill, but we got it over the line. When I asked the team how many interventions did it take, the project lead said took 65 interventions. She counted, and some of those was, she had something like 40 meetings with members, with Oireachtas members, to get that over the line. So, it takes a lot of work to influence and shape the national agenda. So, but I have to say, working with the members is one of the best things about the job. It is wonderfully diverse. You get to work on diverse issues and work with so many different personalities throughout the island, and I love that about it.
Mhm. And you're able to draw on so many different perspectives, different skills, different talents, different networks as well, because it's so often it's important that somebody knows somebody that might be able to help. So that's all great. But just summing up what you were really saying there about actually achieving change and progress. You have to be focused. And I like that. Go for one thing at a time, really focus on it. Obviously clarity about what the outcomes you want are, but as well as that persistence, build and build and build and build, and each action builds on the other. So you have to have real staying power to bring about change, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, and you have to be kind of relentless, and you have to be optimistic, to be honest. So even when they say, no, that's never going to happen, you have to go, yes, it will. and you find a way to make it happen. I remember I met with a minister. I won't say who it is. I met with a minister and we were looking for a particular initiative. And he said, look, I can't do that in my time. I don't have the energy and space to do it before my next 3 years. And we were like, okay. And the intervention we knew was the most important intervention for the group of children we were working for. So we basically, what do we do? Okay, let's just focus on getting this over the line. Let's just do nothing else, only this. And that's what we did. So we, did a report. We got onto this week, RTEs this week. We made it headline news. We lobbied all the senior officials on it. And then eventually it gets announced it's going to happen. So, but that's the kind of thing you have to do as well. You have to, when you're convinced that what you're looking for is the best measure to address the problem. And I think that's partly often the issue I see sometimes in the work, that people they know there's a problem, but not totally sure what the solution is. And I think that's part of it. But once you have that, then you have to plot out a campaign for how you're going to deliver it. And you have to motivate your team always, all the way through, even all the knockbacks. You have to motivate them and go, look, we've had a knockback. Let's feel bad today. Let's go over tomorrow, and we're going to change this. And I always think your attitude, the way you tilt a story or issues, it has an enormous effect on the people around you.
Absolutely. And it has to be so strategic. That's really what's coming through with what you're saying. And we know we're going to hit bumps in the road, and you have to pick yourself up and dust yourself down. It's not easy working in many sectors that are working with children at the moment in Ireland. So motivating people within the sector to keep on board as well, I think is always a challenge. But talk a little bit about motivating teams, because again, that's regardless of what sector people are in, motivating teams is a core leadership responsibility. So what are some of the things that you do to motivate your folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing that I fall back on is purpose, and what why the why behind everything. And even sometimes when I'm talking to my senior managers, and I watch them leading meetings, and the odd time and I'd say, okay, I want you to always start with the why, because sometimes we get into the how too quickly. We're very effective managers, and we overmanage and we underlead. But I think, and most of the time, people who come into our sector, in the human rights sector and the community voluntary sector, they are dedicated to public service, is the truth of it. And we are serving the public's interest. And so that's why they will connect with the purpose of why we're doing this. What is it we're going to change? What's the problem that we need to change? And what is it that we can do together? So I think that's a big part of how I lead and motivate teams. I mean, I think the other thing that's important as well is trying to give people as much responsibility as possible, actually, is the truth of it. And I've seen that. I mean, it doesn't always work, but like 99% of the time, it does work, basically. So when people feel they have, responsibility for delivering a very important change, that is very motivational in itself. And they're very personally engaged. Now, they can overwork. And so part of my job is often trying to stop people overworking. Right? Is actually the truth of it, because when you're so dedicated and engaged, it can flip into that. And you can do that for intense periods, but you can't do it on an ongoing basis. It just affects your performance and even your leadership and decision making. So I think that's a really important part of motivating teams. And I suppose the other bit is like each person or team is different. And it's interesting because I'm in my job, obviously 12 years, 13 years, and over the team changes at different points over the years. Some of us are there a long time together, but different things motivate different team members. And I do think you need to understand the different groups and age ranges. What is the package of things that are going to motivate them? So, often for so, and I use the personal meetings I have with the team members to kind of understand that. I use the interviews when I meet people for the first time, how to understand what motivates them. I'd always ask the question, do you love your job? And if you don't, why not? And we have that conversation. And sometimes they might know why they love their job or don't love their job, have never thought about it before, and getting to that is very important. But I know there are different staff engagement frameworks, and I like to use those actually in my work as little tools and guides, where I position people and understand. They're just devices to help you understand where people are fitting in and what they actually need to be more motivated. So you find people, when they come into an organization for the first time, some of them need a lot of direction, actually, to help them understand where they fit in and where their role is. And so that's another part of it. But I think a big part in our organization and with other sector and through other sector is supporting people as well, having a supportive workplace, making sure they take time back for themselves, being there from the time their parent dies, making sure they've space to go off and be with their family for that. I think all of those pieces are very important in terms of, motivating teams, building loyalty, building the relationship as a group of people. All of that, I think, is important.
And so important. And I'm minded of the wonderful work of Jim Collins, who said you just don't need the right people on the bus. You need the right people in the right seats on the bus if you're going to be successful. And when I'm working with organizations where there's tensions or performance issues, you very often find that people's interests and skills aren't aligned with the job that they're currently doing.
Yeah.
But if you can shuffle a bit, because success breeds success. And wins breed more wins and more contentment, and celebration. That's the other thing. Given that your work is so challenging to get things over the line, you've got to celebrate all the little wins along the way, don't you? And keep them focused on how far you've come.
Yeah, and that's nearly hard because, people emotionally move on, and you want to do the team review, how it worked and that kind of stuff, and then people that don't want to do that anymore. They're like, oh, I'm on the next thing now. So there's an element of that as well. They're finding the time, but I agree with you in terms of motivating staff. I mean, I that performance management piece where you're told the person's underperforming, you put them on the performance plan and you give them like now like what I have noticed over the years is, one is the fit. Was the job the right fit for the person or their aspirations? And that's the first thing you need to establish. And if it isn't, both of you together work together, okay, this isn't the right job. And let's acknowledge that, because you spend the rest of your time trying to fix it and you can't. And then the other bit is, so once they are the right fit for the job and the organization, all about making them flourish and fly in the job. That's actually what it's about. That's what performance management is about, is making sure people flourish and thrive in their roles. It's not this corrective type approach. And I've seen that being employed. It makes the line manager miserable, makes the staff member miserable, and because there's another underlying issue, and it was maybe this wasn't the right job for them.
And then it gets even messier because it goes to grievance and nobody wins.
Yeah.
And you just lose valuable people, and it sucks the emotional heart out of everybody. So tell me this, with all the amazing things that you guys have been involved in and you personally have led out on, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the work on child poverty is probably what I'm most proud of. And when I think about where I grew up in Dublin, I just happened to live in an area where there were a lot of families that were struggling all around me. And some of those families, let's say there was drug addiction. I mean, there's probably intergenerational poverty and abuse happening. There was abuse, domestic violence, alcoholism. And, I would have seen children my age and younger. I saw some of the outcomes. So we had a neighbour who spent 2 spells in prison as a teenager and eventually ended his life through suicide. And that really disturbed my family and us, because he used to play with my siblings. Another neighbor was, and he was my age. I remember playing with him on the road, and he was always actually a nice guy and popular, but he ends up murdering someone and dies in prison. And as I get, I'm nearly 50, and as I get to this age, and when you see generations of people around you that don't exist anymore because of they're living in this tremendously abusive situation, or there was a lot of poverty and there was no one able to help them. That certainly is something that's very live for me. And I find sometimes, even I'm at meetings, some of those children, young people are actually sitting beside me, right? I'm actually thinking about them in the different meetings that I go to when I'm representing children and young people's interests. So when we've achieved a lot of success in supporting the government. I mean, remember, all the success is really the government, right? It's the politicians that use their capital. It is the government departments that design and implement initiatives. It's the media that does the work highlighting the issues. We're just one of the little cogs in the wheel, trying to raise the issues for children. But the work we've done on poverty, I think I'm particularly proud of. The situation is, at the moment now, we have free school books, we have hot school meals. There's a unit in the Department of Taoiseach working on child poverty issues. We have an Equal Start programme for early years in DESH area. We've seen an expansion of the DESH programme. All of these things we worked on and with our members in the background. And so when I see those measures being rolled out, I'm just so delighted. One of the ones I'm particularly happy about is, in the past, we got some increases in welfare payments for refugee children. And I remember meeting refugee children. I was on a government working group, and I went into some of the centres to talk to them. And the girl's story, I mean, it really struck me. She was of African descent, and it was pretty obvious, actually, her hair was in very bad condition. I could kind of see it. And she was just folded in the chair. And I asked her what was the thing that affected her most. And she said the thing that affected her most is she didn't have money to buy shampoo. And she has to use the soap dispenser in the bathroom in the direct provision centre. And she said, it was terrible for her hair. Her hair is in terrible condition, but she had no real shampoo or conditioner that she could use to mind her hair. And remember thinking, oh my God, poverty, like there was the human dignity issue, that poverty can actually cause human dignity issues for some very marginalised and vulnerable people. And I remember we convinced Leo Radker for a €6 increase, that particular budget. And it took a lot of chasing him and his advisor and all the things that happened with that. And I think I doorstepped him, which I don't normally do. And I got given out to for doing that by some official or whatever. But we did get that €6 increase. And I did think about that girl, and I was like, okay, there's a €6 for shampoo, So, those things definitely are what sit with me. And I know when I'm older, it'll be very simple things that I'll be looking back on.
You just exude, Tanya, passion, energy, hope, determination. And I'm sure that's why your leadership in CRA has been so, so successful. Tell me this as we bring this wonderful interview to an end, what are some of the things that listeners can do to help with regard not just to children's rights, but human rights generally? Because hopefully this will help to raise awareness. But what can people do?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is affecting children and young people is the lack of enough of a workforce. So if you look at a lot of the gaps at the moment affecting children and young people, it's we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough social workers, we don't have enough youth workers, we don't have enough people working in the mental health area. And it is the most meaningful transformational work you can be involved in. So, I'd ask anyone thinking about the choices they're going to make in college or who are thinking about a second career to think about working within the children and youth services. You won't regret it. But it's what children and young people need at this moment in time. You might also think about being a foster parent. We don't have enough foster carers. They are the lifeblood of the care system, and the children that are cared for by foster carers actually have the best outcomes. And even very small infants, I mean, I hear situations where TUSLA and the social workers are under so much pressure trying to find foster carers for very young children even, and they don't exist. So I'd ask people to please think about it. Think about it if you've raised your family. Think about it if you don't have a family. Think about being a foster carer. I think the other things to think about in terms of influencing human rights is to believe in them, because they do work. And even though we live in a generation where you can see the flouting of the rule of law, I mean, I have somehow become sensitized to seeing children's body parts on social media because of Gaza. How has this happened that a genocide is happening on our doorstep? And there's lots of events like that happening around us. But I do believe in human rights. I see them delivering all the time. I think connecting and believing in human rights is pretty essential. And I'd say anyone at any background, go off and learn about human rights. There's lots of amazing opportunities. But the other thing is think about influencing and activism in your local community and what you can do. And that can be as small as, but it's really very significant, is when the politicians are coming to the front door and they're looking for your vote in the locals and the Europeans and the presidential election. Think about the issues that you raise with them, because the politicians and the political parties, they register everything you've said, and they are using that to help influence and shape what issues that they work on for the people, because that's their job, is to represent the public's interests. And one person can have an effect. Obviously 10, 20, 30 can have a bigger effect together, but your vote and what you say to a politician does really matter. But also think about getting involved in local community volunteerism. There's usually lots of local community and human rights type campaigns where you can make a difference as well.
Yeah. And Tony Robbins always says that the spiritual needs are of the soul for everybody, our contribution, and you're just giving us loads and loads of ways that people can contribute, and also growth, because when you are engaged in any of those activities, then you're growing and developing and learning more as an individual. Tanya, thank you so much for spending time with us today. That was absolutely fascinating. And we wish you and all your colleagues at Children's Rights Alliance all future success.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's certainly no wonder that the Children's Rights Alliance is so successful with Tanya Ward at the helm. She just simply exudes purpose passion, commitment, focus, and energy, all vital factors in successful leadership. In reflecting on her learning about how to effectively bring about progress in the life circumstances of children, Tanya shared the following insights. Rights-based organisations have to work in partnership with governments to help them understand the issues and also consider what can be done about them. She said shopping lists don't work. Focus on one issue, plan a campaign, take multiple actions to build momentum. She said persistence and optimism are key, and you have to simply be relentless in going after whatever the particular goal is. It's a leader's responsibility to keep the team motivated, and that starts with making sure that everyone is on purpose. So ensure staff are given responsibilities and that their roles are aligned with their interests and skills, and everybody fully understands the core purpose of the organisation. So my challenge for you this time is simply to echo Tanya's call to action. So she put a plea out there to everyone to do some or all of the following things. Help to build the workforce with children. This is critically important. We are short in all of the core professions. So think about becoming a teacher, social worker, youth worker, or mental health worker. Or if you've already got a career and you're thinking of changing career, look to see how you might add value in one of those professions. And then she made a heartfelt plea to consider fostering a child, saying that fostering is the lifeblood of the care system. Become more aware generally of human rights issues and believe in them. Become more active in your local community and raise issues of concern with your local politicians. In other words, she called us all out to do our bit. So Tanya Ward completely embodies the core theme of this podcast. Success is never accidental.